They say the loneliest place in the world isn't an empty room. It's a full house where no one is allowed in. The iron gates hadn't opened in 3 years. Not for friends. Not for family. Not even for the executives who ran half the city under Ethan Cole's name. The mansion sat on the edge of a quiet Connecticut hillside, all glass and stone, worth more than most people would earn in a lifetime, yet somehow colder than the December wind that swept across its long driveway. Inside, the lights were always dim, the air always still, as if the house itself had learned to hold its breath. Ethan preferred it that way. Silence didn't ask questions. Silence didn't remind him of what he lost. Every morning, he woke at exactly 6 a.m., not because he wanted to, but because his body refused to forget routines built in a life that no longer existed. Coffee black. 1 slice of toast. Emails answered without emotion. Meetings attended without presence. A billion-dollar empire moved at his command, but none of it touched him anymore. Not really. By 7:30 p.m., the house would fall back into its quiet rhythm, the kind that echoed too loudly if you listened too closely. That night, the storm rolled in without warning. Rain tapped against the tall windows, first gentle, then insistent, like fingers drumming on glass. The wind followed, low and restless, weaving through the trees lining the property. Ethan stood near the fireplace, untouched, staring at flames that flickered without warmth. He didn't turn when the first knock came. It was faint, almost lost in the storm. Probably a branch, he thought, or the wind shifting something loose along the porch. He took a slow sip of coffee, already cold. The second knock was louder. Intentional. 3 steady taps. Not rushed. Not afraid. Just there. Ethan's jaw tightened. No one came here. No one was supposed to know how to reach him without going through layers of security, assistance, barriers he had built brick by brick. And yet, another knock. This time softer. Patient. Something about it didn't demand entry, it asked for it. He set the cup down. For a moment, he didn't move. Old instincts pulled him back, told him to ignore it. To let whoever stood out there figure it out on their own. That's what the world had done to him, after all. But his feet moved anyway. Slow. Reluctant. He crossed the long hallway, each step echoing against marble floors that had never known laughter. The door stood tall at the end, solid oak, custom-built, reinforced. A door that hadn't opened for anyone in years. His hand hovered over the handle. Just for a second. Then he pulled it open. Rain rushed in first, cool and sharp, carrying the scent of wet earth and something unfamiliar. And there she was. A girl stood on his doorstep, soaked through, strands of light brown hair clinging to her face, her jacket too thin for the weather, her hands wrapped around a small box she held like it mattered. She looked up at him, eyes steady despite the cold, despite the storm, despite him. Not intimidated, not impressed, just present. "Hi," she said, her voice soft but clear over the rain. "I think I might be at the wrong house, or maybe exactly the right one." Ethan didn't answer. He just stared. Because for the first time in 3 years, someone had knocked and stayed. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Rain traced thin lines down the edges of the doorway, slipping past the threshold like it had been waiting for an invitation too. Ethan's grip on the door tightened, his expression unreadable, the kind of stillness that made most people uncomfortable enough to leave. But she did not move. She shifted the small box in her hands, glancing briefly over his shoulder at the dim interior behind him, then back to his face, as if measuring something invisible. "I know it is late," she said, her voice steady despite the cold that had turned her fingers pale. "And I know this probably looks strange, but I was told this address, and I just needed to make sure." Ethan's eyes flicked to the box. Plain, slightly worn at the corners. Nothing about it screamed urgency, and yet the way she held it said otherwise. "You have the wrong house," he said finally, his tone flat, controlled, already closing the distance between them without moving an inch. It was the kind of answer that usually ended conversations, the kind that shut doors, long before they physically closed. But she did not nod. She did not apologize. Instead, she exhaled slowly, a small cloud of breath disappearing into the cold air, and gave a faint, almost apologetic smile. "Maybe," she admitted, "but can I just stand here for 1 minute and make sure I am not making a mistake?" Ethan frowned slightly. No one negotiated with him like that. No one stayed after being dismissed. His instinct told him to end it, to close the door, to return to the quiet that did not ask anything from him. But something in her voice did not push. It did not demand. It simply remained. The wind picked up, brushing rain against her shoulders, and for a brief second, he noticed the way she tried to hide a shiver, pressing her arms closer to her sides as if it did not matter. That should not have mattered to him either. And yet, his hand did not move. 1 minute, he said, more to himself than to her. She nodded, grateful in a quiet way that did not feel exaggerated, then stepped just slightly under the edge of the doorway, careful not to cross fully inside without permission. Water dripped from the ends of her hair onto the stone floor, forming small, uneven circles that slowly spread outward. She glanced down at the box again, then back up. "My name is Lily," she said. "Lily Harper." The name meant nothing to him. Or at least, it should not have. Ethan did not respond. Silence stretched between them again, but this time it felt different, thinner somehow, like something was beginning to shift underneath it. Lily swallowed lightly, as if deciding whether to continue, then held the box forward just a fraction. "I was told to bring this here," she said. "To you." Ethan's eyes sharpened. "By who?" The question came out sharper than he intended, cutting through the quiet like a crack in glass. She hesitated. Not long, just enough for him to notice. "Someone who said you would understand," she answered softly. The words landed heavier than they should have. Ethan felt it, that subtle tightening in his chest he had learned to ignore, the kind that came when something from the past brushed too close to the surface. He stepped forward then, just enough to take the box from her hands. His fingers brushed against hers for the briefest second, cold meeting warm, and something about that simple contact lingered longer than it should have. He pulled the box back, looking down at it, as if it might explain itself. It did not. When he looked up again, Lily was still there, watching him, not with expectation, not with fear, but with a quiet patience that unsettled him more than anything else that night. And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole did not immediately know how to send someone away. The box felt heavier than it should have, not because of its size, but because of what it carried without saying a word. Ethan turned it slightly in his hands, noticing the faint crease along one corner, the kind that came from being held too tightly for too long. There was no label, no name, no return address, just silence wrapped in cardboard. He looked back at Lily, his eyes narrowing just slightly, searching her face for something that explained why she was still standing there, soaked from the rain, as if leaving had never been an option. "You said someone sent you," he said, his voice quieter now, but sharper underneath. "Who?" Lily hesitated again, but this time it was different. Not uncertainty, not fear. It felt like she was choosing her words carefully, like each one mattered more than it should. "He told me not to say his name unless you asked twice," she said. Ethan's expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. A flicker. Something old. Something buried. "Then I am asking again." The air between them tightened. The storm outside seemed to fade for a second, like the world itself was listening. Lily met his gaze, steady, unwavering. "Daniel Harper," she said. The name landed like a quiet echo in a room that had not been opened in years. Ethan did not react right away. He did not move. But something inside him did. Something that had been locked behind years of silence, of control, of refusing to remember. Daniel Harper was not a name that belonged in the present. It belonged to a version of his life that had ended long ago. A version he had made sure stayed buried. Ethan's grip on the box tightened slightly, the edges pressing into his palm. "That is not possible," he said, more to himself than to her. Lily swallowed, her voice softer now, but still steady. "I know how it sounds." She paused, glancing briefly at the box in his hands before looking back up. "He asked me to bring it to you. He said you would know what it means." Ethan let out a slow breath, his jaw tightening as memories threatened to surface. He turned slightly, stepping back into the house, the warmth inside barely noticeable compared to the cold that had settled in his chest. He did not invite her in. Not yet. But he did not close the door either. The storm continued behind her, rain tapping against the stone like a clock counting down something neither of them could see. Carefully, Ethan opened the top of the box. The cardboard shifted with a soft sound, revealing something wrapped in a thin layer of cloth. His movements slowed, controlled, like he was afraid of what he might find if he moved too quickly. He pulled the cloth back just enough to see the edge of what was inside. And then he froze. It was simple, worn, familiar in a way that made his chest tighten before his mind could catch up. A small, old-fashioned pocket watch, the kind that had not been made in decades, the kind that only one person he had ever known used to carry everywhere. Ethan's breath caught, barely noticeable, but real. His fingers hovered over it, not touching, as if contact would make it all too real. Behind him, Lily remained quiet, watching, not stepping forward, not interrupting. Just there. Present. He said, she added gently. That time does not fix anything, but it reminds you what you are still holding on to. The words settled into the space between them, heavier than the storm outside. Ethan closed his eyes for a brief second, the past pressing closer than it had in years. And for the first time since that door had opened, it was not the rain that made him feel unsteady. It was the realization that something he had buried had just found its way back to him. The watch did not tick. It just rested there in Ethan's hand, silent, as if time itself had decided to stop the moment it reached him again. His thumb hovered over the worn metal casing, tracing a faint scratch near the edge, one he remembered without needing to think. It had been there years ago, the result of a careless drop during a long night that neither of them had ever talked about afterward. Daniel had laughed it off back then, said it gave the watch character. Ethan had not laughed. He had never been good at laughing at things that mattered. A low breath escaped him as he finally closed his fingers around it, the cool surface grounding him in a way the empty house never could. Behind him, the rain continued its quiet rhythm, but something else had shifted. The silence was no longer empty. It was full, heavy, alive with memories he had spent years avoiding. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice lower now, stripped of the distance he usually kept between himself and everyone else. Lily stepped a little closer to the doorway, still careful not to cross fully inside, as if she understood that line mattered more than it should. "It was given to me," she said. "A few weeks ago." Ethan turned his head slightly, his gaze sharpening again. "That does not answer my question." She nodded once, accepting the edge in his tone without reacting to it. "I was volunteering at a small community center in Hartford," she explained. "They run programs for people who do not have family nearby, people who just need someone to talk to." She paused, watching his reaction, but he gave her nothing. "He was there," she continued. "Quiet, kept to himself most of the time. But he noticed things, small things, like who stayed late, who skipped meals, who pretended they were fine." Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. That sounded like Daniel. Always watching, always understanding more than he said out loud. "He asked me one day why I kept showing up," Lily said softly. "I told him it was because I did not think anyone should feel invisible." The words hung there for a moment, simple but weighty. Ethan looked down at the watch again, his grip loosening just enough to let it rest in his palm. Invisible. That was a word he had learned to live with, to prefer, even. "And he gave you this?" he asked. Lily nodded. "Not right away. We talked for a few days first. About random things. Coffee, books, the weather. But every time your name came up," she hesitated, as if stepping carefully onto something fragile. He stopped. Ethan's chest tightened again, sharper this time. "He never said much," she added. "But it was clear that whatever happened between you, it never really left him." Ethan let out a quiet breath, his eyes drifting toward the dark hallway behind him, as if expecting something from the past to walk out and explain itself. It did not. It never did. "The last time I saw him," Lily continued, her voice softer now, "he asked me for a favor." Ethan's attention snapped back to her. "He said there was something he could not carry anymore," she said. "Something that did not belong to him, even if he had been holding on to it for years." She gestured gently toward the watch in Ethan's hand. "He said it belonged to you." The weight of it pressed deeper now, not in his hand, but somewhere beneath it. "Why you?" Ethan asked, the question slipping out before he could stop it. Lily met his gaze without hesitation. "Because I listened," she said simply. The answer was not complicated. That was what made it harder to ignore. Another beat of silence passed, but this one felt different. Less guarded, more uncertain. The storm outside began to ease, the rain softening into something quieter, almost like it was giving them space. Ethan looked at the threshold between them, at the thin line Lily had not crossed. Then, slowly, almost without realizing it, he stepped back and opened the door just a little wider. He did not say the words. He did not need to. And for the first time in years, the house that had kept everything out allowed someone in. Warm air met her first, not the kind that wrapped around you like comfort, but the kind that felt unfamiliar after standing too long in the cold. Lily stepped inside slowly, careful, her shoes leaving faint damp prints against the polished floor as if she was afraid to disturb the quiet that lived there. The door closed behind her with a soft click, sealing out the last of the storm, but the silence inside felt louder somehow, stretching across the high ceilings and empty spaces like something unfinished. Ethan did not speak. He moved past her, deeper into the house, the watch still resting in his hand, his thoughts somewhere far beyond the present moment. Lily glanced around, taking in the details without staring. The place was immaculate. Every surface clean, every object placed with intention, but nothing felt lived in. No photographs, no personal traces, just structure, control, absence. "You can leave your jacket there," Ethan said after a moment, his voice distant as he gestured toward a chair near the entrance. Lily nodded, slipping it off carefully, wringing a bit of water from the edge before setting it down. She did not ask questions. She did not comment. She simply followed, her presence quiet but steady, like she understood that speaking too much would break something fragile in the air. Ethan stopped near the kitchen, if it could even be called that. It looked untouched, more like a showroom than a place where anyone actually cooked. He set the box down on the counter, the watch still in his hand, and stared at it again as if expecting it to change. It did not. "Do you want tea?" Lily asked gently. The question caught him off guard, not because of what it was, but because of how normal it sounded in a place that had not known normal in years. He hesitated. Then, almost reluctantly, he nodded once. "There should be something in the cabinet," he said. Lily moved quietly, opening drawers with care, finding what she needed without making a mess of the order that clearly mattered here. The soft clink of a mug, the low hum of water heating, the simple rhythm of something ordinary began to fill the space. Ethan leaned back slightly against the counter, watching her without meaning to. She did not move like someone trying to impress him. She moved like someone who was used to taking care of things that were not hers. That thought settled somewhere deeper than he expected. "He talked about you," Lily said after a moment, her voice light, not forcing the conversation, just letting it exist. Ethan did not respond right away. His eyes stayed on the watch, but his attention shifted. "Not directly," she added. "More like in pieces. Stories that never had a name attached, but you could feel they belonged to someone important." Ethan exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing just a fraction. "He always did that," he said quietly. "Said enough to make you think. Never enough to make it clear." Lily smiled faintly at that, pouring the hot water into 2 mugs. "He said you were the kind of person who carried everything alone," she continued. "That you thought it made you stronger." She turned, offering him one of the mugs. "And did he say he was wrong?" Ethan asked, his voice almost challenging, but softer than before. Lily shook her head gently. "No," she said. "He said you were the kind of person who forgot that strength is not the same as isolation." The words lingered between them as Ethan took the mug from her, his fingers brushing against the warmth. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The house, once silent, now held the quiet sound of something beginning. Not loud, not obvious, just present. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan did not feel the need to push it away. The warmth of the tea lingered longer than the taste. Ethan stood there, the mug resting in his hands, watching the faint steam rise and disappear into the still air, as if it was the only thing in the room willing to move freely. Lily did not rush to fill the silence. She leaned lightly against the counter across from him, her fingers wrapped around her own cup, her presence calm in a way that did not feel forced. It was unfamiliar, not uncomfortable, just different. "How long has it been?" she asked gently after a while, her voice careful, like she was stepping onto uncertain ground. Ethan did not look up right away. His gaze stayed on the watch, now resting beside the box, the metal catching just enough light to remind him it was real. 3 years, he said finally. The number came out flat, practiced, like he had repeated it enough times that it no longer needed emotion attached to it. Lily nodded slowly, not asking what happened. Not yet. She took a small sip of her tea, giving him space to decide what to do with the silence. Ethan exhaled, a quiet sound, barely noticeable, but it carried something heavier underneath. He was not supposed to leave, he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Lily's eyes softened slightly, but she did not interrupt. We built everything together, he continued, his voice low, steady, but not as controlled as before. The company, the systems, the structure. He handled the parts one did not care about. The people, the conversations, the things that required patience. A faint, almost bitter smile touched his lips for a second. He was good at it. Lily listened, her posture still, her attention unwavering. Ethan glanced at the watch again, his fingers brushing against it unconsciously. And then one day, he went on. He decided he was done. The words hung there, simple, but heavy with something unspoken. Lily tilted her head slightly, her voice soft but clear. Done with the work, or done with you? Ethan's jaw tightened. The question landed closer than anything else had so far. He did not answer immediately. The house seemed to hold its breath again, waiting. He said he needed something different. Ethan replied after a moment. Something that was not built on deadlines and expectations. He let out a short breath, not quite a laugh. He said I would not understand. Lily studied him quietly. Did you? Ethan shook his head once, a small, sharp motion. No, he said. I did not. His grip on the mug tightened slightly. I thought he was walking away from everything we had built, from everything that mattered. He paused, his gaze drifting somewhere distant, somewhere that did not belong to the present. So I let him. The words were quiet, but they carried weight. Not anger. Not anymore. Something closer to regret. Lily set her cup down gently, the soft sound grounding the moment. He did not sound like someone who walked away, she said carefully. Ethan's eyes flicked back to her, sharp again, defensive instinct rising before he could stop it. You did not know him, he said. Lily did not react to the edge in his voice. She just met his gaze, steady as before. Maybe not, she admitted. But I know what it looks like when someone still cares about something they left behind. The statement lingered, quiet but firm. Ethan looked at her, really looked this time, as if trying to understand why she spoke with such certainty about something that had nothing to do with her. Or at least, nothing that he knew of. Why are you doing this? He asked suddenly. The question came out sharper than intended, but not unkind. Just searching. Lily hesitated, just for a second, her eyes dropping briefly to the watch before returning to him. Because he asked me to, she said simply. Ethan frowned slightly, the answer not satisfying in the way he expected. That is not enough, he said. Lily's expression shifted then, something softer, more personal, slipping through. Maybe not for you, she replied quietly. But for me it is. The room fell silent again, but it was not empty. Not anymore. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt something he had not allowed himself to feel in years. Not anger. Not control. Something quieter. Something uncertain. Something that did not disappear when he tried to ignore it. The question lingered between them longer than anything else that night. Not loud, not demanding, but impossible to ignore. Ethan watched her closely now, not with suspicion alone, but with something deeper, something that had begun to shift the moment she stepped inside. Lily did not look away this time. She held his gaze, steady, as if she had already decided that whatever came next mattered more than keeping things comfortable. He was not just someone I met, she said quietly. The words came slower now, more deliberate. Ethan felt it immediately, that subtle change in tone, the kind that meant the truth was about to become personal. He stayed at the center for a while, she continued. Longer than most people do. Not because he had nowhere else to go, but because he chose to stay. Ethan's brow tightened slightly. That did not fit the version of Daniel he had held onto for years. The version that walked away without looking back. He helped people, Lily said, her voice soft but certain. Not in big ways. Not in ways anyone would write about. Just small things. Fixing things that were broken. Sitting with people who did not want to be alone. Listening. She paused, her eyes dropping briefly before returning to him. He was good at that too. Ethan looked away for a moment, his jaw tightening as something unfamiliar pressed against the edges of his thoughts. This version of Daniel, it did not match the one he had chosen to remember, and that made it harder to hold on to the anger he had lived with for so long. Why did he not come back? Ethan asked, the question slipping out before he could stop it. It was quieter than he expected, less defensive, more honest. Lily's expression softened, but there was something heavier behind it now. He tried, she said. Ethan's head snapped back toward her, the words landing sharper than anything else she had said so far. What do you mean, he tried? His voice carried more edge now, but underneath it was something else. Urgency. Lily took a slow breath, as if steadying herself. He wrote letters, she said. More than one. He just never sent them. Ethan stared at her, disbelief flickering across his face. That does not make any sense. Lily nodded slightly, as if she had expected that reaction. It did not to me either, she admitted. Not until I asked him why. The room seemed to shrink around them, the quiet growing heavier with each word. Ethan felt it, that pull between what he believed and what he was hearing. He said. Lily hesitated, her fingers tightening slightly around the edge of the counter. He said he was not sure you would want to hear from him anymore. The words landed softly, but they carried weight. Ethan let out a quiet breath, shaking his head slightly. That is not. He stopped, the sentence falling apart before it could finish, because he did not know if it was true or not. Not anymore. Lily watched him carefully, giving him space, but not stepping back. He said you were the kind of person who does not forgive easily, she added gently. Ethan let out a short, hollow breath, something close to a laugh, but without humor. He was not wrong. Lily's gaze did not waver. But he also said you were the kind of person who never forgets what matters, she continued. The words settled into the space between them, quiet but undeniable. Ethan looked down at the watch again, his fingers tightening slightly around it, as if it might slip away if he did not hold on. There is more, Lily said softly. Ethan's eyes lifted again, something cautious returning to his expression. What? Lily hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough for him to notice. The reason he gave me the watch, she said. It was not just to return it. Ethan's chest tightened slightly, the air in the room feeling heavier than before. Then what was it for? Lily met his gaze, steady, but this time there was something else there. Something that had not been there before. He said, she replied quietly, that you would need to know the truth, even if it changed everything you thought you understood. The words did not raise her voice, but they shifted something in the room. Something deeper than silence. And for the first time since she arrived, Ethan felt it clearly. Whatever this was, it was not just about the past. It was about something that had never been finished. The air in the room shifted in a way Ethan could not ignore. It was no longer just about memories or regret. It was something else now, something closer to the edge of a truth he had never allowed himself to question. His fingers tightened around the watch, the cool metal pressing into his palm as if grounding him, while everything else began to feel uncertain. What truth? He asked, his voice lower, steadier than he felt. Lily did not answer right away. She took a small step closer this time, not hesitant, not intrusive, just enough to close the distance that had existed between them since the door first opened. The day Daniel left, she said softly. It was not what you think. Ethan's jaw set immediately, instinct rising before reason could catch up. I was there, he said, his tone sharpening. I heard what he said. Lily shook her head gently, her expression calm but firm. You heard part of it, she replied. Not all of it. The words landed deeper than he expected, because somewhere beneath the certainty he had held onto for years, there had always been something unfinished. Something he never fully understood but chose not to question. Then explain it. Ethan said, his voice quieter now, but carrying an edge that came from needing to know. Lily nodded once, as if she had been waiting for that. He did not leave because he wanted something else, she began. He left because he believed he was about to lose everything anyway. Ethan frowned, the statement not fitting into anything he remembered. That does not make sense, he said. Lily held his gaze, unwavering. There was a deal, she continued. A financial restructuring your company was going through at the time. It involved risk. More than you were told. Ethan's expression shifted slightly, something in his memory catching, but not fully forming. Daniel found out before it went through, she said. He tried to stop it. The room seemed to close in just a little more, the silence pressing closer around them. Ethan's mind moved quickly now, piecing together fragments he had ignored, dismissed, or never fully seen. Why would he not tell me? He asked, the question slipping out with more confusion than anger. Lily's voice softened. Because the decision was already made by you. The words did not hit loudly. They did not need to. Ethan felt them settle somewhere deep, unsettling the foundation he had built his understanding on. You approved it, Lily continued gently. You trusted the people who presented it to you. And Daniel knew that if he pushed harder, it would not just be the deal that broke. It would be your partnership too. Ethan looked away, his chest tightening as pieces began to fall into place in a way he had never allowed before. So he walked away, Lily said. Not because he stopped caring, but because he thought it was the only way to protect what you had built, and you. The silence that followed was different now. Heavier. Honest. Ethan's grip on the watch loosened slightly, his fingers tracing its edge again as if searching for something solid. And the letters? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lily's eyes softened. He wrote them after, she said. When he realized leaving did not fix anything. When he realized it just left things unfinished. Ethan closed his eyes for a brief second, the weight of it settling in fully now. Not betrayal. Not abandonment. Just a misunderstanding that had been allowed to grow into something much bigger. When he opened his eyes again, Lily was still there, steady as she had been from the beginning. Why tell me this now? He asked quietly. Lily took a slow breath, her voice softer than before. Because he cannot anymore. The words lingered, simple but heavy with meaning. Ethan felt it then, fully, the shift from past to present, from unanswered questions to something that could no longer be avoided. And for the first time since everything began, he understood something clearly. The story he had been holding on to was not the truth. And now, he had to decide what to do with the one that was. The truth did not explode. It did not shatter the room or break the silence all at once. It settled, slow, heavy, like something that had always been there, waiting for him to finally see it clearly. Ethan stood still, the watch resting in his hand, but it felt different now. Not just a memory, not just a reminder. It was something unfinished that had been placed back into his life for a reason. He looked down at it, his thumb brushing over the worn surface again, but this time his grip softened. For years, he had held on to anger because it was easier than holding on to doubt. Anger gave him direction. It gave him something to push against. But now, there was nothing to push against. Only something to understand. He thought he was protecting me, Ethan said quietly, the realization settling into his voice. Lily nodded gently. He did not want to take something from you that you were not ready to question, she said. Ethan let out a slow breath, the tension in his shoulders easing in a way that felt unfamiliar, almost unsteady. And I thought he walked away, he added. The words carried a quiet weight, but not the same bitterness as before. Something closer to regret. The room remained still around them, but it no longer felt empty. It felt present, real. Ethan turned slightly, his gaze drifting through the house, taking in the silence he had built, the distance he had maintained for years. It did not feel the same anymore. Not after tonight. Not after her. Lily stood where she had been, steady, patient, never forcing anything, never asking for more than what he was willing to give. And somehow, that made everything harder to ignore. Why did he choose you? Ethan asked suddenly, his voice quieter now, but more open than before. Lily hesitated for a moment, then gave a small, honest smile. Because I listened, she said again, the same simple answer, but it carried more meaning now. Ethan studied her, really seeing her this time, not as a stranger who had arrived at his door, but as someone who had stepped into a space no one else had been allowed to enter. Someone who had not tried to change him, but had still managed to shift something inside him. He looked back at the watch, then at the box it came in, then finally at her. And for the first time in a long time, the decision in front of him did not feel like something he had to control. It felt like something he had to choose. Slowly, he set the watch down on the counter, not pushing it away, not hiding it, just placing it where it belonged. Then he took a step forward. Just one. But it mattered. Stay, he said. The word was simple, but it carried something new. Not a command. Not an obligation. An invitation.